we're switching over for a minute into unpaid care work and thinking about the ways that we all benefit as a society from this care work. If, and this is the case, I won't be having children. And if we all agreed that having children was too much of a hassle and we all decided that we really didn't want to do it because it just wasn't a good gig, we would have a problem in that every society is going to need young people. We need all kinds of people of all kinds of ages. As we age, so even if it's from a very selfish perspective, I won't be having children, but I'm going to need some younger folks by the time I'm older. By the time I'm 60, I won't be the one planting the food. I will need somebody else to drive that tractor and pull those potatoes out. And so I'm going to benefit from the fact that somebody is having children right now and raising them. And I don't feel comfortable mooching off of somebody else's labor and benefiting from it and not actually paying them for that work. We've come to think about care work as not work. We have the expectation that everybody should be able to be autonomous. That's kind of how we've designed a society, is everybody should be autonomous and be able to take care of themselves. The thing is, there's many, many humans who need a lot of support. It can be very small humans who need help, everything from feeding themselves to cleaning themselves. It can be medium-sized humans who need support in learning skills. It can be much older humans who need help with basic life skills, like, again, feeding themselves and clothing themselves. And it can be adult humans who need extra care and support. There are plenty of adult humans through disability and different life conditions who need extra support in doing basic life skills. But since we've got the expectation that everybody should be able to take care of themselves, we kind of shirk care work and consider it to be less important. There's a lot of messages that encourage this notion. We think of care work as unskilled. And when we say that work is unskilled, we're not willing to pay for it. So we would say, yeah, anybody can load a dishwasher. That's not that big of a deal. Anybody can do a load of laundry. That's not that big of a deal. We really don't need to be paying extra for this work because it's unskilled. And that's problematic because when we think of all the work that goes into keeping humans well, through cleaning or cooking or caretaking or soothing, this is really amazing, important work and incredibly complex. It is really hard to do all of the things at once and do them well. Care work is particularly problematic because when it's done really well, when your biggest goal is to have it be unnoticeable, when it's done really, really well, everything just kind of flows. The house is clean, everybody's fed, humans are relatively clean and well and happy. So the best you can strive for is to have it be unnoticeable. When things go bad is when you start noticing all of the work that goes into keeping everybody being well. The dishes pile up, there's no food, the clothes are dirty. So one of the problems we have in recognizing care work as work is that it kind of vanishes and disappears. When it's done well, it just goes away. And another problem is the fact that this is repetitive work that doesn't have accumulation that's easily noticeable. Like if you were to be able to take all of a family's dishes and stack them up, you'd be able to notice that it's a ton of work to get this done over a week. But since it's done and then it just gets repeated and repeated and repeated, you won't notice the huge impact that you've had. You don't see a giant stack of dishes. Another problem with care work is that the urgency makes it very complex work. The timing, the way that you're doing a lot of multitasking is really complex work. You have to time the baby's nap with the clothing and the ding of the dryer. This is all stuff that's complex, that is a skill that's developed over time. The tasks that we often assign, typically men in a household, are often not as urgent. So you could put off mowing the lawn for a week. You could put off washing the car for a couple weeks. You could put off taking the trash until tomorrow morning. The thing is, there's a lot of tasks that are a lot more urgent. So that baby needs to get fed within the next half an hour, or there's going to be hell to pay. There's going to be screaming and crying, and that's going to be 4 hours of trying to calm the baby down. So the urgency of the tasks itself is really important as we're thinking about the complexity of this work. We're taught to think of care work as natural and instinctive and something that is, again, unskilled. And we'll say women are natural caretakers. This is something that comes very easily to them. And so therefore, this shouldn't be work that is paid. We're also taught to think about this as work that's done out of love. And love is absolutely a part of caretaking, and emotional connection is very, very important. But even if we leave that equation out of it, if we just think about the ways that we need to present ourselves in terms of affection, we are taught to think of this as love work, therefore it should be unpaid work. And that's problematic because it is really, really hard work. And as you start thinking about the exercise that you did and thinking about all the work that goes into getting a human from newborn to 20-year-old that's ready to work, if we do like a real numbers figuring out, I've had students come up with a $700,000 figure, which would be $35K a year for 20 years of work. I've had students come up with $1 million too. I've had students come up with $3 million when I think about those 20 years of work. If you think about all the work that goes into it and actually try to pile it up and put a number on it, we start to recognize that it's a ton of work. And if we start to think about who is doing this work and not getting paid for it, we can see that systematically, consistently, all over the world, it's women who are assigned this task. Again, there's exceptions and things are changing. And yet when we do time use surveys, even today, it's really overwhelmingly women that are doing this work. So how is it that we get convinced to do this work for free when it's absolutely crucial to the survival of the species? It's really, really hard work, and it takes a ton of time. If we start to think about all these patterns, it's really problematic. Another thing that keeps us from recognizing this as important, valuable work is that we don't have kind of a product to point to. And again, the stack of dishes. When you're an architect, you can point to the building and say, I did that. That's pretty amazing. When you're a care worker, you get to say, today I did nothing. And you can see a house that kind of looks empty and well taken care of. We want to think about the ways that we could support these care workers in their work as a society. So as a member of society, again, I'm not doing that care work, but since I benefit from it, I want to make sure that I'm not mooching from it. So the structures that we need to change in society for care workers to be well, we would have to think about things like maternity leave and how long that should be. The fact that the U.S. is one of 2 countries in the world that do not offer paid maternity leave. The other one is Papua New Guinea. Everywhere else in the world they have this. It's bad enough that when I teach outside of the U.S., when I teach in Costa Rica and Ecuador and Colombia, people don't believe this. They think I'm confused. They actually kind of brush me off. I tell them, in the U.S. they don't have paid maternity leave. They go, nah, that couldn't possibly be. Most societies in the world have figured out that when somebody creates a human and takes it out of their body, they're probably going to need a little bit of rest, and that their resting is actually really good for all of us as a society. When mothers and children can spend some time together, they can recover. Their physical health is off to a better start. Their emotional health is off to a much better start. When we consider that in Oregon, there's a law that says that you cannot sell puppies that are less than 8 weeks old. That law is in place to make sure that those puppies are off to a good start and off to a healthy start. And yet, as a society, we're willing to force humans to give up a newborn human within days of its birth. That's bad for us all around. Even if I were to take it from a very selfish perspective, not even thinking about that baby and that adult, it's really bad for me when somebody has to give up a 1-week-old because they don't have the time to heal and bond and do well and establish breastfeeding and get a good immunity boost. There is many societies in which caretaking is valued, and anybody who's doing caretaking for an under 6-year-old is getting paid a stipend from which they can live. And recognizing that this is work that requires an incredible amount of hours, and forcing somebody to do care work and paid work at the same time for a specific period is a really bad idea. And so as a society, they've gotten themselves organized and saying, we're going to have paid parental leave until not just 6 weeks, but we might make it even 6 years. And let me double check if I'm skipping anything. Oh, yes. In terms of structures, if we were to think about good structures that could support caretaking, I've mentioned paid parental leave, but also having decent daycare. So having a place where you can take a break as a care worker and leave your child so that you can go do other adult errands like grocery shopping or the bank or having a minute to yourself. If parents had a good place that they can depend on leaving children for a few hours that was clean and healthy and affordable, that would make a really big difference in their job as care workers. Being able to take a break is something that we take for granted at work. Being able to take a vacation is something we take for granted at work. And these care workers usually never get an access to that rest. And, oh yes, in thinking about equally shared parenting, we want to think about the ways that having a group project that is really tied to over-specialization is problematic. So when you have only one adult human who is capable of feeding the small human and only one adult human that is capable of gathering money, we have a problem because you're dependent on both of those humans to be available at all times. And it's a really vulnerable system because if one of them goes missing, then you don't have a way of picking up that task. You can't switch roles easily. You can't be flexible. It can't be that the non-caretaking parent is able to put the baby down to sleep. She never goes to sleep when I put her down. She won't eat broccoli when I feed it to her. Why don't you do it? We have over-specialization, and it's problematic because if anything were to go wrong, things are too vulnerable. We also can't spot each other. We can't take over and support each other in our work. So these are some of the things that we want to consider as we think about care work as very important and valuable to a society. Have a good week.